The grand station floated in the darkness of space like a jewel among the stars. Epsilon Prime was the largest neutral meeting place in the known galaxy, a massive structure that could house representatives from 10,000 different worlds. Today it was filled to capacity. The Grand Convergence happened only once every 5 years, and every major civilization sent their best diplomats to attend. Ambassador Daniel Price walked through the crowded halls with steady confidence. He was a tall man in his 50s with gray hair and kind eyes that had seen both the best and worst of humanity. Behind him, his aide Lisa Grant carried a datapad filled with evidence they would present today. Beside them, Security Chief Kevin Hayes kept a watchful eye on the crowds of alien beings that filled every corridor. Daniel had been preparing for this moment for months. Earth was still new to the galactic stage, having joined the community only 15 years ago. Most species saw humans as curious but ultimately harmless. They were good at building things, skilled at medicine, and surprisingly talented at finding peaceful solutions to conflicts. But humans were also physically weaker than most warrior races, and their military was small compared to the great empires that dominated the galaxy. This suited Daniel just fine. He preferred words to weapons, negotiation to conflict. That was why he had spent weeks building a coalition of smaller species who were tired of being bullied by the Viridian Compact. The Compact was a sprawling empire that controlled over 40 star systems. They had grown not through open war, but through legal manipulation, economic pressure, and carefully orchestrated accidents that happened to their rivals. High Chancellor Vrax, their leader, was a master of appearing civilized while crushing anyone who stood in his way. Daniel had evidence of their crimes. He had testimonies from refugees, financial records showing bribes and theft, and surveillance footage of compact forces destroying civilian vessels and blaming pirates. Today, in front of the entire galactic community, he would expose the truth. Lisa handed him the datapad as they entered the main conference hall. The chamber was enormous, with seating arranged in circular tiers that rose toward the ceiling. Thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds sat in their designated areas, speaking in thousands of languages that were instantly translated by the station's advanced systems. Daniel took his seat in the Earth delegation area. Kevin stood behind him, professional and alert. Lisa sat beside him, reviewing their presentation one last time. "Are you ready?" she asked quietly. Daniel nodded. "We have to be. This might be our only chance to stop them before they hurt more innocent people." Across the chamber, in the Viridian Compact section, High Chancellor Vrax sat surrounded by his advisors. He was a tall reptilian being with golden scales and cold, calculating eyes. When he noticed Daniel looking his way, Vrax smiled. It was not a friendly expression. The session began with routine matters. Trade agreements were discussed, border disputes were mediated, and several new species were welcomed into the galactic community. Daniel waited patiently, knowing his time would come. Finally, the council moderator called Earth's delegation to the floor. Daniel stood and walked to the central speaking platform. The chamber fell silent as thousands of eyes turned toward him. "Members of the Galactic Council," Daniel began, his voice calm and clear, "I come before you today to speak on behalf of those who cannot speak for themselves. For the past decade, the Viridian Compact has presented itself as a lawful and civilized empire, but beneath that facade lies a pattern of cruelty, theft, and murder." A wave of murmurs rippled through the chamber. Vrax leaned forward in his seat, his expression darkening. Daniel continued, "I have evidence of these crimes. I have the voices of refugees who watched their homes burned. I have financial records showing how the Compact steals resources from weaker worlds, and I have footage that proves their military has been destroying civilian ships and blaming it on pirates." He activated the holographic display, and images filled the air above the platform. A small colony world in flames, children crying in refugee camps, ships exploding in the darkness of space, financial transactions showing millions of credits stolen from developing worlds. The chamber erupted in shocked conversation. Some delegates shouted in anger. Others demanded explanations. Vrax stood, his voice booming over the noise. "This is an outrage. These accusations are lies spread by enemies of peace and prosperity. Earth is a young and naive species that does not understand the complexities of galactic politics." Daniel met his gaze steadily. "The evidence speaks for itself. I call for a formal investigation into the Viridian Compact's activities and sanctions until that investigation is complete." Several delegations began voicing their support. The smaller species, the ones who had suffered under the Compact's shadow, stood with Earth. Even some of the neutral powers seemed convinced by the evidence. Vrax's expression turned venomous. He spoke rapidly to his advisors, who quickly left the chamber. Daniel noticed but focused on answering questions from the council. Lisa provided additional documentation. Kevin watched the Viridian section carefully, a growing sense of unease in his gut. The debate continued for over an hour. Daniel could feel the momentum shifting in their favor. They were going to win this. The truth was going to prevail. Then the world exploded. The blast came from beneath the speaking platform. Daniel had only a fraction of a second to feel the heat and see the flash of light before everything went dark. The explosion tore through the chamber, killing him instantly along with Lisa and Kevin. Dozens of other delegates died in the blast, or were crushed by falling debris. Alarms screamed throughout the station. Emergency systems activated, sealing off sections and evacuating survivors. Medical teams rushed to help the wounded. Security forces locked down all docking bays to prevent anyone from escaping. In the chaos, Vrax and his delegation were escorted to safety by station security. He expressed shock and horror at the attack, offering his sympathies to the victims. He suggested that perhaps Earth had enemies they did not know about, or perhaps the evidence had been fabricated and someone had silenced Daniel before he could be exposed as a fraud. But in the private quarters of his ship, Vrax smiled coldly. The problem had been eliminated. Earth would mourn their diplomat, the council would offer condolences, and in a few months everyone would forget. That was how the galaxy worked. He had no idea how wrong he was. He had no idea that humanity was not like other species. He had no idea that by killing Daniel Price he had awakened something that had slept in human hearts for generations. He had awakened their wrath, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The news reached Earth 18 hours after the explosion. President Helen Carter was in her office in Geneva when her security chief burst through the door, his face pale. She knew immediately that something terrible had happened. Within minutes she was in the emergency command center, surrounded by her cabinet and military leadership. The holographic display showed the footage from Epsilon Prime, the explosion, the bodies. The list of casualties that included Ambassador Daniel Price, Lisa Grant, Kevin Hayes, and 17 other human delegates and staff members. Helen watched the video 3 times, her expression growing colder with each viewing. Admiral Jack Morrison stood beside her, his jaw clenched tight. He was a career military officer who had commanded Earth's defense fleet for 8 years. Beside him, General Lisa Brooks of Special Operations Command watched the footage with the calculating gaze of someone already planning a response. Intelligence Director Paul Chen was pulling up every piece of data they had on the Viridian Compact and the attack. "Do we know who did this?" Helen asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Paul brought up a new display. "Preliminary investigation points to the Viridian Compact." The explosive was placed under the speaking platform before Ambassador Price was scheduled to speak. Station security footage shows 3 Viridian operatives accessing that area 12 hours before the session. They've since disappeared. "The Compact is denying involvement," Admiral Morrison added. "Vrax is calling it a tragedy and suggesting it might have been Earth's enemies or someone trying to discredit the ambassador." Helen turned to face her team. "What do we know about their capabilities?" General Brooks pulled up tactical data. "The Viridian Compact controls 42 star systems. They have approximately 10,000 warships ranging from patrol craft to heavy battleships. Their ground forces number in the billions. They're one of the 5 largest military powers in the galaxy. And our forces? 793 ships. 200 million military personnel across all branches. We're outnumbered roughly 12 to 1 in space assets alone." The room fell silent. The mathematics were brutal and clear. Helen looked at each person in the room. "What are our options?" Paul spoke first. "Diplomatically, we can file a formal complaint with the Galactic Council. They'll launch an investigation that will take months or years. We might get sanctions approved, maybe even reparations eventually." "Military options?" Helen asked. Admiral Morrison stepped forward. "Madam President, a direct conflict with the Viridian Compact would be extremely costly. Even with our technological advantages, we're facing a numerically superior force with extensive experience. That said," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "we do have options they don't know about. General Brooks continued. For the past 10 years, we've been developing weapons and tactics that no other species has seen. Stealth technology that makes our ships virtually invisible. Quantum disruption weapons that can bypass most shield systems. AI-assisted targeting. That's generations beyond what the rest of the galaxy uses. We've kept all of this classified. We've been preparing for a war we hoped would never come, Admiral Morrison said. But if it does come, we won't fight it the way they expect. Helen turned back to the display showing Daniel Price's last moments. She had known him personally. He had been a good man, dedicated to peace, believing that words could solve problems that weapons could not. Now he was gone, murdered while trying to help others. Get me a direct channel to the Galactic Council, she ordered, and start mobilizing the fleet, quietly. 6 hours later, President Helen Carter appeared before the Galactic Council via holographic transmission. Her image materialized in the center of the great chamber, and the assembled delegates fell silent. They expected tears, pleas for justice, perhaps angry words. What they got was something else entirely. Helen's voice was calm, almost conversational. Members of the Council, yesterday, 19 representatives of Earth were murdered at Epsilon Prime. We have evidence that this attack was orchestrated by the Viridian Compact in order to silence Ambassador Price before he could expose their crimes. Brax stood immediately. This is an outrageous accusation without proof. Earth is seeking to blame us for a tragedy we had nothing to do with. Helen didn't even look at him. She continued speaking to the Council. I am offering the Viridian Compact one opportunity to surrender those responsible for this attack. You have 72 hours to turn over the operatives who planted the bomb, and anyone who gave the orders. If you comply, we will allow the Council to determine appropriate justice. And if we refuse these baseless demands? Vrax asked mockingly. Now Helen looked directly at him. Then Earth will consider it an act of war and we will respond accordingly. The chamber erupted in chaos. Species who had never heard Earth even raise its voice in anger were shocked. Many delegates immediately began calling for calm, for patience, for Earth to follow proper procedures. Vrax laughed. You dare threaten the Viridian Compact? A newborn species with barely 800 ships challenging an empire of 10,000? Your grief has made you foolish, President Carter. Helen's expression didn't change. 72 hours, High Chancellor. I suggest you use that time wisely. The transmission ended. Back on Earth, the public reaction was explosive. When news of the ultimatum spread, millions of people poured into the streets, not in panic but in fury. Humanity had tried to be peaceful. They had tried to be reasonable. They had sent their best diplomat to help others, and he had been murdered for it. The protests weren't calling for restraint. They were demanding action. Helen watched the crowds from her office window. She understood their anger because she felt it too. But anger without purpose was just noise. What humanity needed now was focused, deliberate, and unstoppable. The 72 hours passed slowly. The Galactic Council sent delegations begging Earth to reconsider. Neutral species offered to mediate. Some of Earth's friends warned that the compact was too powerful, that this would only lead to humanity's destruction. The Viridian Compact sent no response at all. Frax gave interviews to galactic news networks, dismissing Earth's ultimatum as the tantrum of a child race that didn't understand how the galaxy really worked. He assured everyone that the compact had nothing to do with the bombing and that Earth's threats were meaningless. When the deadline expired, President Carter made one final broadcast. This time it was transmitted across every communication network in the galaxy. The Viridian Compact has chosen war, she said simply. So be it. Within hours, Earth's entire military mobilized. Ships that had been docked for routine maintenance suddenly launched. Reserve units were activated. But instead of massing at the Viridian border as everyone expected, the fleet simply vanished. Station sensors tracked them leaving Earth space, and then nothing. 793 warships disappeared from every tracking system in the galaxy, as if they had never existed. In the Viridian capital, Vrax received the reports with amusement. Let them hide, he told his military commanders. When they realize how outmatched they are, they'll come begging for mercy. He had no idea that humanity's ships were already deep inside compact territory, invisible and deadly. The hunt had begun. The first sign that something was wrong came from Border Station 12, a Viridian military outpost on the edge of compact territory. The station commander sent a routine report at the scheduled time, And then 6 hours later, all communication ceased. The compact Navy sent a patrol to investigate and found the station intact but completely empty. Every Viridian soldier and officer had vanished without a trace. The station's security footage had been wiped clean. High Chancellor Vrax dismissed it as a technical malfunction or perhaps a mutiny. He sent investigators and forgot about it. He had more important matters to address, like consolidating his power, now that Earth's annoying ambassador was permanently silenced. Then it happened again. And again. Over the next week, 17 Viridian outposts, 4 supply depots, and 2 patrol fleets simply disappeared. Sometimes there were brief distress calls. Sometimes the ships or stations would fire their weapons at nothing before going silent. The few survivors who were found spoke in terrified whispers about shadows that moved through space, about ships that appeared from nowhere and vanished just as quickly. The Viridian military was baffled. They increased patrols. They established new security protocols. They sent their best warships to investigate the disappearances. 3 of those warships never reported back. Then the recordings started arriving. Captain Alan Rhodes sat in the command chair of the Earth stealth frigate Shadow of Terra, watching his tactical display with satisfaction. His ship was small compared to the massive Viridian battleships, but it possessed something they didn't: technology that made it invisible to every sensor system the compact possessed. Target acquired, his weapons officer reported. Viridian destroyer Falcon class. Shields are up, but they haven't detected us. Send the message first, Alan ordered. I want them to know who's hitting them. The communications officer nodded and transmitted a simple text message to the Viridian ship. It read, "For Ambassador Daniel Price, for Lisa Grant, for Kevin Hayes, for all 19 souls you murdered. Earth remembers." 3 seconds after the message was received, the Shadow of Terra fired. Quantum disruption torpedoes phased through the Viridian shields as if they weren't there, and detonated inside the destroyer's hull. The ship broke apart in a brilliant flash of light. Recording transmitted to the galactic news networks. The communications officer confirmed. That's the 15th one this week. Alan nodded grimly. Every attack was recorded and broadcast for the entire galaxy to see. President Carter wanted everyone to understand that Earth wasn't hiding, wasn't ashamed, and wasn't going to stop. Across the compact's territory, similar scenes played out hundreds of times. Earth stealth ships struck from the darkness, destroying military targets with precision and then vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. But ships weren't the only threat the Viridians faced. Commander Sophie Blake led a Marine boarding team through the corridors of a captured Viridian supply station. Her squad moved in perfect silence, their armor's stealth systems active. They had inserted via a small shuttle that the station's sensors never detected, cutting through the hull and infiltrating the facility. Their target was the station commander, a Viridian officer named Vex, who had been involved in planning several attacks on civilian worlds. Sophie had studied his file for days. She knew his habits, his security protocols, and his weaknesses. The Marines moved like ghosts through the station. When Viridian soldiers appeared, they were neutralized with stunners before they could raise the alarm. Sophie's team reached the commander's office in less than 8 minutes. Vex was reviewing reports when the door opened. He looked up, expecting one of his subordinates, and instead found himself staring at 6 human soldiers in advanced combat armor. Before he could even think about reaching for his weapon, Sophie had crossed the room and pressed a stunner to his neck. "Commander Vex," she said calmly, "you're coming with us." 10 minutes later, the Marines were gone, taking Vex and 3 other senior officers with them. The station's garrison didn't discover the abduction until the morning shift change. By then, the humans had already extracted everything the officers knew about compact military operations. These tactics baffled and terrified the Viridian military. They were used to traditional warfare where fleets met in open space, exchanged fire, and the stronger force won. They understood sieges and invasions, bombardments and occupations. What they didn't understand was an enemy that refused to fight fair, that struck from nowhere and vanished like smoke. High Chancellor Vrax watched the recordings of Earth's attacks with growing rage. His military commanders assured him that they were developing countermeasures, that they would soon adapt to these cowardly tactics. But Vrax could see the fear in their eyes. The mighty Viridian compact was being humiliated by a species they had dismissed as harmless. "Deploy the entire fleet," he ordered. "I want every ship hunting these human ghosts." "Find them and destroy them." "Sir?" One admiral hesitated. "If we deploy everything, our core systems will be vulnerable. Vulnerable to what? Vrax snapped. The humans have less than 800 ships. Even with their tricks, they cannot threaten our homeworld. Find them and end this embarrassment. The compact fleet mobilized, thousands of warships spreading across their territory in a massive search operation. It was exactly what Admiral Jack Morrison had hoped they would do. All units, he transmitted from the flagship Valiant. The compact has left their core systems exposed. Execute Phase 2. What the Viridian Compact didn't know was that Earth's stealth ships had only been the opening move. While the compact wasted resources hunting ghosts on the borders, the main human fleet had been positioning itself in deep space, waiting for this exact moment. 700 warships suddenly appeared in orbit around 3 of the compact's most important industrial worlds. Not the homeworld, not yet, but the manufacturing centers that supplied the Viridian military with ships, weapons, and supplies. Planetary defense forces scrambled to respond, but they were designed to repel invasion fleets, not deal with an enemy that had appeared in orbit without warning. Earth ships didn't bombard the planets. Instead, they deployed precision strikes against military factories, weapons depots, and orbital shipyards. General Lisa Brooks coordinated the ground operations from her command ship. Special forces teams inserted on all 3 worlds simultaneously, seizing control of key facilities and broadcasting messages to the civilian population. Citizens of the Viridian Compact, the message played in every language. Earth is not at war with you. We are at war with your government, which murdered our delegates and has oppressed countless innocent beings. Remain in your homes. Do not interfere with military operations. Any civilian who aids military forces will be considered a combatant. Anyone who stays clear will not be harmed. It was psychological warfare as much as military action. The Viridian people had been told that humans were weak, that they were emotional and irrational. Instead, they found an enemy that was precise, professional, and completely in control. On the galactic news networks, analysts struggled to comprehend what they were seeing. Earth had revealed military capabilities that no one suspected existed. More importantly, they had demonstrated a level of strategic thinking that shocked even the most experienced military species. The Galactic Council sent desperate messages to both sides, calling for an immediate ceasefire. Neutral species begged Earth to show mercy. Some even suggested that the compact had learned its lesson and would surely negotiate now. President Helen Carter's response was broadcast to the entire galaxy. She stood in front of Earth's flag, her expression carved from stone. The Viridian Compact was given a chance for peace. They chose war. Earth did not start this conflict, but we will finish it. To any species watching, understand this clearly. Humanity does not seek conquest. We do not desire your worlds or your resources, but we will never again allow our people to be murdered without consequence. She paused, letting her words sink in across thousands of worlds. To the people of the Viridian Compact, we say this: your government has lied to you. They have committed crimes in your name. We offer you one final chance. Surrender those responsible for the deaths of our delegates. Remove Vrax from power, or stand aside while we do it for you. Vrax's response came within hours. He appeared on every screen in compact space, his scales flushed with rage. The Viridian Compact will never surrender to these upstart primates. We will crush them utterly. 3 days later, Vrax ordered the use of biological weapons against the human colony on New Horizon. The virus killed 30,000 men, women, and children before Earth's medical teams could develop a cure. It was the worst mistake Vrax would ever make. The medical teams arrived at New Horizon Colony 12 hours after the first reports of illness. What they found would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Men, women, and children lying in the streets where they had collapsed. Families dead in their homes, schools full of small bodies. The biological weapon had been designed to kill quickly and painfully. Dr. Kate Palmer worked without rest for 3 days straight, trying to save whoever she could. She managed to cure the survivors, but 30,000 colonists were already gone. As she stood in the colony's main square, surrounded by rows of covered bodies waiting for burial, she sent a single message back to Earth. They murdered children. The news reached President Helen Carter while she was in a cabinet meeting. She read the report in silence, her hands shaking slightly. Then she stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city of Geneva below. Admiral Jack Morrison and General Lisa Brooks waited, knowing that something fundamental had just changed. When Helen finally spoke, Her voice was quiet but absolutely cold. "Authorize Operation Reckoning. All forces full deployment. No more restraint." The Admiral straightened. "Madam President, are you certain?" Helen turned to face him, and he saw something in her eyes that made him step back. It wasn't anger anymore. It was something far more dangerous. It was the absolute certainty of someone who had made an irreversible decision. "They killed our children, Jack. They used biological weapons against civilians. There is no going back from this. The Viridian Compact government will fall. The only question is how much of their military wants to die defending it." Within 6 hours, every combat-ready ship in Earth's fleet was moving toward the Viridian home system. Over 600 warships, the largest human fleet ever assembled, dropped out of stealth and began the final advance. There was no subtlety now, no ghost tactics. This was a direct assault, and everyone in the galaxy knew it was coming. The Galactic Council sent frantic messages begging Earth to reconsider. Species that had remained neutral suddenly found their voices, calling for peace talks and mediation. Some suggested that surely the Compact would negotiate now that they saw Earth was serious. Admiral Morrison responded to these messages personally. The time for negotiation ended when they murdered 19 delegates at Epsilon Prime. Any species that wishes to intervene on behalf of the Compact should consider very carefully whether they want to join them in defeat. No one intervened. The Viridian Compact mobilized everything they had left. Thousands of warships pulled back from the borders and massed around their home system of Varix Prime. High Chancellor Vrax ordered the planetary shields raised to maximum and deployed orbital defense platforms by the hundreds. He broadcast to his people that humanity's fleet would break against their defenses like waves against a cliff. Captain Ryan Foster commanded the Earth battleship Vengeance, one of the largest warships humanity had ever built. As the fleet approached Varix Prime, he could see the Compact's defensive forces on his tactical display. It was an impressive sight. Under normal circumstances, assaulting such a heavily defended world would cost thousands of lives. But Admiral Morrison had no intention of fighting a normal battle. "All ships, hold position at the outer system," he ordered. "Captain Foster, you're up." Ryan activated his communication system and transmitted on all frequencies, ensuring every being on Varix Prime could hear him. "Citizens of Varix Prime, this is Captain Ryan Foster of the Earth Defense Fleet. In 72 hours, we will dismantle your planetary government and arrest those responsible for war crimes. We have no quarrel with the civilian population. You have 72 hours to evacuate to designated safe zones. Any military personnel who wish to surrender will be treated in accordance with the laws of war. This is your only warning." The message caused chaos on Varix Prime. Vrax immediately went on the air, calling it a bluff and ordering citizens to remain calm. But the footage from Earth's previous operations had spread throughout the Compact. People had seen what happened to military targets. They had seen the precision of Earth's weapons. Many believed the warning was genuine. The Galactic Council was horrified. Dozens of species sent urgent messages to Earth, condemning the plan to attack the Compact homeworld. Some called it genocide. Others warned that this would make Earth a pariah among civilized species. President Carter addressed these concerns in a brief statement. "Earth is offering the civilians of Varix Prime something their government never offered to the 30,000 innocents on New Horizon. We are offering them time to get to safety. We are offering them a chance to live. That is more mercy than they showed our children." Over the next 72 hours, millions of Viridian civilians fled the capital city and other military centers. Some military units deserted rather than face the human fleet. Others held their ground, believing in Vrax's promises that the defenses were impenetrable. When the deadline expired, the assault began. But it wasn't what anyone expected. Earth ships didn't bombard the planet from orbit. Instead, they deployed thousands of drop pods carrying elite special forces teams. General Lisa Brooks had planned every detail of the operation personally. The targets were specific: government buildings, military command centers, and Vrax's personal fortress. Colonel Amy Sullivan led Alpha Team in the assault on the central government complex. Her Marines landed in the courtyard and immediately engaged the Compact soldiers defending the building. The fight was brutal but one-sided. Earth's soldiers wore powered armor that made them stronger and faster than any Viridian. Their weapons were more accurate, their tactics more sophisticated. Amy's team fought their way through the complex floor by floor. They used non-lethal weapons whenever possible, stunning defenders rather than killing them. But when Viridian soldiers used lethal force, the Marines responded in kind. The battle lasted 4 hours before Amy's team reached the council chambers where the Compact's government was barricaded. "This is your final chance to surrender," she announced through the door. "Throw down your weapons and come out peacefully. You will face trial, but you will live." For a long moment there was silence. Then the doors opened and Viridian officials began filing out, their hands raised in surrender. But Vrax wasn't among them. Lieutenant Greg Martinez tracked the High Chancellor to his personal fortress on the edge of the city. The building was heavily fortified, protected by automated defense systems and elite guards. Greg's team studied the fortress for 20 minutes, identifying weak points and planning their assault. They used shaped charges to blow through the outer wall and advanced under covering fire from aerial drones. The Compact guards fought fiercely, but they were defending a fixed position against an enemy trained in exactly this kind of urban warfare. One by one, the defensive positions fell. Greg found Vrax in his command center, surrounded by his inner circle of advisors and officers. The High Chancellor was screaming orders into communication systems that no longer responded. His military had collapsed. His government had surrendered. Everything he had built was falling apart around him. When he saw the human soldiers enter his sanctum, Vrax reached for a weapon. Greg was faster, shooting the weapon out of his hand before he could fire it. "High Chancellor Vrax," Greg said formally, "you are under arrest for war crimes, including the murder of 19 Earth delegates and the use of biological weapons against civilian populations. You will be taken alive to stand trial." Vrax looked at him with pure hatred. "You think you've won? You think this is over? There are thousands of species in this galaxy. They will never accept human dominance. They will destroy you eventually." Greg shook his head. "We don't want dominance. We just want justice. And today, that's what you're going to face." Within 12 hours, the Viridian government had fallen. Vrax and his entire cabinet were in custody. The military command structure had been dismantled. Earth's forces controlled all strategic positions on Varix Prime, and resistance had effectively ceased. Admiral Morrison established orbital control and began coordinating with what remained of the Compact's civilian government. He made it clear that Earth had no intention of occupying their worlds or imposing its will on their people. They had come for one purpose only: to bring war criminals to justice. True to their word, Earth's forces began preparing for a trial. But this wouldn't be a secret military tribunal or a show trial designed to humiliate the defeated. President Carter had insisted on something different. Something that would show the entire galaxy what humanity truly stood for. They would give Vrax exactly what he had denied Daniel Price. They would give him the truth, presented to the entire galaxy with no shadows to hide in and no lies to protect him. They would give him justice, transparent and fair, judged not just by humans but by representatives of every species he had wronged, and the galaxy would watch every moment of it. The trial was held in orbit above Varix Prime, aboard a specially configured Earth station that had been brought into the system for this exact purpose. President Helen Carter had insisted on complete transparency. Every species in the galaxy received an invitation to send observers. Journalists from thousands of worlds were given full access to the proceedings. Nothing would be hidden. The prosecution team was led by Attorney General Rebecca Stone, a woman known for her meticulous preparation and unwavering commitment to the law. She had spent weeks reviewing every piece of evidence, every testimony, every document that proved the Compact's crimes. But she had also invited prosecutors from other species, including several who had suffered under Vrax's rule. The defense team was chosen from the Compact's own legal experts, professionals who agreed to represent Vrax not because they supported him, but because they believed in the principle that even monsters deserved proper legal representation. Earth provided them with every resource they requested, access to all evidence, and complete freedom to mount their defense. The judges were carefully selected: 3 humans, 3 Viridians chosen by lottery from the civilian population, and 3 representatives from neutral species known for their legal expertise. 9 beings who would weigh the evidence and render judgment. High Chancellor Vrax sat in the defendant's chair, his golden scales looking dull under the harsh lights. Around him sat his cabinet members and military commanders, each facing their own charges. Security was tight but not oppressive. The accused were treated with dignity, fed well, and given comfortable quarters. Rebecca Stone stood before the court on the first day of the trial and laid out the charges. High Chancellor Vrax and his co-defendants are charged with crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against sentient beings. Specifically, they are charged with ordering the assassination of 19 Earth delegates, using biological weapons against civilian populations, conducting illegal warfare against multiple species, theft of resources from developing worlds, and systematically destroying evidence of their crimes. The evidence was presented methodically over the next 3 weeks. Surveillance footage showed Viridian operatives placing the bomb at Epsilon Prime. Communication intercepts proved that Vrax had personally ordered the attack. Financial records demonstrated decades of systematic theft. Testimonies from refugees described atrocities committed by compact forces on dozens of worlds. The biological attack on New Horizon was documented in painful detail. Dr. Kate Palmer testified about arriving at the colony and finding 30,000 dead, including over 8,000 children. She spoke without emotion, presenting facts and medical evidence, but everyone in the courtroom could see the pain in her eyes. The defense team did their job professionally, challenging evidence where they could, and arguing that Vrax had been acting to protect the compact from what he perceived as threats. They called witnesses who testified about humanity's aggressive expansion and Earth's rapid military buildup. They suggested that Vrax had made mistakes but had genuinely believed he was defending his people. But they couldn't explain away the evidence. They couldn't justify the murder of delegates who had come in peace. They couldn't excuse biological weapons used against children. Every argument they raised crumbled under the weight of documentation, testimony, and facts. On the 23rd day of the trial, the defense rested. The judges retired to deliberate. The galaxy held its breath and waited. Admiral Jack Morrison watched the trial from the Valiant, which remained in orbit as part of Earth's security force. He had never enjoyed political proceedings, preferring the straightforward nature of military operations. But he understood the importance of what was happening below. This trial was about more than punishing Vrax. It was about establishing principles that the galaxy had too often ignored. General Lisa Brooks was on the planet's surface, overseeing the transition of power. The Viridian people had been allowed to hold emergency elections, choosing new representatives free from compact influence. The process wasn't perfect, but it was genuine. Earth had no desire to control Varix Prime or any other compact world. They simply wanted to ensure that the new government would be accountable to its people. It took the judges 3 days to reach a verdict. When they returned to the courtroom, every news network in the galaxy was broadcasting live. Billions of beings across thousands of worlds watched as the head judge, an elderly human woman named Patricia Moore, stood to deliver the judgment. After careful review of all evidence and testimony, this court finds High Chancellor Vrax guilty on all charges, she announced, her voice steady and clear. We find that he willfully ordered the assassination of delegates engaged in peaceful diplomatic activity. We find that he authorized the use of biological weapons against civilian populations. We find that he directed military forces to commit atrocities against innocent beings. We find him guilty beyond any reasonable doubt. Vrax remained motionless, his face an expressionless mask. Judge Moore continued. The co-defendants are similarly found guilty of their respective charges, their level of involvement varying, but their guilt established by the evidence presented. The courtroom was absolutely silent as she prepared to announce the sentence. This court sentences High Chancellor Vrax to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. He will serve his sentence at the Galactic Justice Facility, a new institution that will be established to house those convicted of the most serious crimes against sentient beings. He will live, but he will never again have the freedom to harm others. The other defendants received sentences ranging from 20 years to life, depending on their level of involvement in the crimes. Each sentence was carefully considered proportional to the evidence presented, but the trial wasn't quite finished. President Helen Carter had requested permission to address the court, and Judge Moore granted it. Helen stepped to the center of the chamber, her presence commanding immediate attention. High Chancellor Vrax believed that might makes right, she began. He believed that the strong could do as they wished to the weak. He believed that power placed him above justice. Today this court has proven him wrong. But this trial is about more than one criminal and his crimes. It's about what kind of galaxy we want to live in. She paused, looking around at the packed courtroom and knowing that billions more were watching across the stars. Earth came to the galactic community seeking friendship and cooperation. We believed in the principles that supposedly governed civilized species: peace, justice, and respect for all sentient life. When our ambassador tried to defend those principles, he was murdered. When we demanded justice, we were mocked. And when we sought to protect our people, we were forced into war. Helen's voice grew stronger. We did not want this conflict, but we will never again allow our people to be slaughtered without consequence. We will never again stand aside while the powerful prey upon the weak. And we will never again trust that justice will simply happen on its own. She turned to face Vrax directly. You thought humanity was weak because we valued peace. You thought we were foolish because we believed in negotiation. You learned, too late, that choosing peace is not the same as being unable to fight. It simply means we understand that war should be the last resort, not the first response. Vrax finally spoke, his voice bitter. You think you've won, but this changes nothing. The strong will always dominate the weak. That is the way of the universe. Helen shook her head sadly. No, High Chancellor. That is simply the way you chose to live, and now you'll spend the rest of your life contemplating the cost of that choice. She turned back to the court. Earth proposes the establishment of the Galactic Justice Tribunal, a permanent institution empowered to investigate and prosecute crimes against peace and crimes against sentient beings. We propose that it be funded by voluntary contributions from member species and staffed by legal experts from across the galaxy. We propose that it have the authority to hold even the most powerful governments accountable for their actions. The proposal was transmitted to the Galactic Council within hours. The debate that followed was intense. Some species worried about sovereignty. Others feared that such a tribunal could be used as a political weapon. But many more recognized that the galaxy needed an institution capable of enforcing the principles that everyone claimed to support. In the end, the Galactic Justice Tribunal was established with support from over 60% of member species. It wasn't perfect, and it would face challenges in the years to come. But it existed, and that was a start. Over the following months, Earth gradually withdrew its forces from former compact territory. They left behind medical teams to help worlds recover from the war. They provided engineering support to rebuild damaged infrastructure. They shared technology to help developing species defend themselves from future aggression. But they did not conquer. They did not occupy. They did not impose their will. True to their word, they simply helped and then left. Epsilon Prime was rebuilt and renamed Price Station in honor of Ambassador Daniel Price. A memorial was erected in the central plaza, bearing the names of all 19 humans who had died there. But it also